And I also have the pleasure, the extreme pleasure, of giving the first award to Mirra Bank. I've known Mirra for quite a while, since our days long ago at WNET or PBS. She started her career as an editor on iconic, groundbreaking films like the Maisels' Gimme Shelter and Barbara Koppel's Harlan County, USA. Her directorial debut, Judy, premiered at the New York Film Festival, and her adaptation of 3 stories by Grace Paley, Enormous Changes at the Last Minute, with a screenplay by filmmaker John Sayles, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and went on to gather film fans around the world. In Last Dance, which was shortlisted for the Academy Award, Mirra explored a fiery collaboration between Morris Sendak and the acclaimed dance company Pilobolus. Recently, Mirra has focused on telling stories that shine a light on the environment and human rights, or as one of our filmmakers yesterday said, the right to be human. I thought that was so great. Recently, she has had the opportunity to work with producer Richard Brockman on feature docs in India, The Only Real Game, which we had here at the festival as well. And the current film that you're going to see tonight, No Fear, No Favor. The Filmmakers' Choice Award is given each year to a filmmaker by her peers, or his peers, by other filmmakers. It's in recognition of artistic excellence and passionate storytelling. Please welcome Mirra Bank to the stage for the Filmmakers' Choice Award.
Well, I must confess, I am so proud and I feel so at home to be here and to be getting this award from this festival with this community. It's really hard to overstate how meaningful that is, because not only have my recent films all been shown here, which has been a tremendous privilege, but some of the greatest documentary filmmakers in the world are here and part of this community. And so I am really overwhelmed, and I feel very grateful, and I hope that, you know, further down the line, this trend will continue with my work. It would be very nice. And as with any film, one is only as good as the collaborators you work with and the people who've helped support you. And I must quickly, and with heartfelt thanks, point out some of my collaborators who are here, and many of you who've also been good enough to look at the work along the way, which is critical, and to give me critical feedback, without which nothing good happens. So first of all, to Terry Lawler, who's the former executive director of New York Women in Film. Our film was supported with finishing support from New York Women in Film and Television. They do fantastic work for filmmakers for many years. I'm a past president, a proud past president, and I want to thank them, and I'm very happy that Terry is here tonight. And also Max Anderson, the wonderful, talented editor that has stayed with me through thick and thin for over years. And most of all, my life partner and the most insightful and tenderly relentless viewer of film and viewer of what's happening when you are shooting and in the field and making sure you see it also, Richard Brockman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirra. This is your check. I hope it helps you a little bit. But it's not only the film. This is a subject for me that I spend my life on. It's near and dear to my heart, whether it be tortoises in Madagascar or snow leopards in Kashmir. Wherever you go, there's human-wildlife conflict. And the more habitat we break closer to the humans, the more of a conflict. And in your case, I was funny today. I was looking at somebody sent me a flyer from, anybody familiar with the Big Life Foundation?
Yes, absolutely.
And did you see the 2 elephants that they had to protect? Like, with the longest tusks in Africa, and it was awful. Every poacher in Africa was trying to kill these two. But this is such a great subject, and I really appreciate it. This is what I spend my life doing, and it's not easy in this world. But thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you. Can I just say a word about that? Thank you. Stay here. I didn't want to jump the gun and step on any, individual sources of recognition, but it is unbelievably meaningful that you've chosen to give us this award and this affirmation of the work. It's not easy to do what you can to make things better in the world, and this area of human activity, which is so relentless, what you've chosen to do and the way you've chosen to recognize us, I will remember my whole life. This is the first time the film has been shown, and to have this be part of it will always be with me. Thank you.
My pleasure.
It'll help us so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you all for coming. I'm Roger Sherman. I am a member of the advisory board of DocFest, Hamptons DocFest, and I'm a documentary filmmaker, and that was a treat.
Thank you.
So you're sitting around East Hampton in your living room, and you say, hey, let's go to Africa and make a film. Yes?
No.
Okay, the phone rings, and they say, hey, come to Africa and let's make a film.
I'm going to toss it to Richard Brockman, because the reason this started is because of...
You're the guilty party,
Yeah.
the producer, one of the producers.
Yeah, so you want to fill that in?
Okay, this is a little story. It's the importance of a really knowledgeable producer. I was asked to give a lecture in neuroscience in Cape Town, so I said sure. That was a great thing. And I called the Nature Conservancy, because we were involved with them in New York, and said, what are you doing in South Africa? They said nothing. However, we've just opened an office in Zambia. You should contact them and see and start there. So we did, and that was kind of the introduction. And our first day in country was that where the dancing and the chief with the elephant tail fly swatter and the man firing the gun. So being this very knowledgeable producer and having gone with the auspices of a TNC, I went up to him and said, hello, I'm Richard Brockman, we're here making a film, and we're with the Nature Conservancy. And his eyes were totally glazed. He was obviously on something, and he took his elephant tail fly swatter and sort of swatted it at me. And that's how we got to Kafue.
Well, that doesn't really answer the question, but we'll go. We'll go on from there.
Please do.
I mean, I think the truth of the matter is that the passion and the interest in protection of animals was really, you always start out, as we all know, documentary filmmakers, you think you're on one track, and then over time, as we went back, and this film represents, I think, 5 trips, 2 to Zambia, 2 to Namibia, and 1 to Kenya. What the big discovery for me as the filmmaker was poverty and poaching are intertwined for a reason. And this is an enormously complex problem, the disappearance of wildlife. It has many causes, and you need many factors in the solution. But if you don't have buy-in from the community, because literally they're benefiting from it, these are mostly enormously poor people who are living in wilderness areas, they must be the beneficiaries of their heritage, and they must want the protection to go on for generation and generation for their children and their children's children. And that's why it was important to me to make this film. It's not a model that we live with in this country, and I think it's a model most people here are unfamiliar with. And it's neither cheap, neither easy, nor
cheap.
Yeah, nor immediately at hand. But it is a grassroots solution. You don't need huge infrastructure for this. What you need is a government that will allow it to happen. and people who are willing to commit their lives to making that change. It's a paradigm shift, and it's one piece of a very complicated problem, but I think a really important one. And my dedication was in letting the people who live there tell the story and tell us why they've made this choice.
If I could just add one, I think, if I can speak for both of us, or the three of us, I think what we began with was huge interest and huge curiosity and the openness to discover. I think we discovered, I think for me at any rate, this movie was discovered as on the ground when we were there, without entirely knowing what we were looking for until the curiosity to find the answers was definitely there for me.
Yeah, well, flexibility is always the key to making a successful film, but you did 5 trips over how long?
About as many years.
About
as many
5 years. So
4 years.
you start by saying, we're going to make this film and let's just go wing it. You obviously have all of the internet to look for lots of different kinds of things. Are you finding your characters before you go? Are you getting there and saying, okay, this place, we're going to talk to you? How do you find, because they're great characters.
We did not know beforehand, other than that the Nature Conservancy more or less hand-delivered us to the Game Rangers International people, and through them we discovered the characters, the initial characters, Annette, Sport, and then eventually the Phoenix Orphanage, Lilai, Liz, the wonderful woman who wants to be a pangolin, pretend to be a pangolin, you know, one thing leads to another, and people lead you to other people. So making the choice for me also really had to do with the people who had made a transition in their lives, you know, for whom this commitment to protection had really determined their life course. And so those are the people you stick with, you know. That's how
Are you editing as you go? Are you taking your footage and saying, Max, this was our editor, Maxwell Anderson.
a wonderful job.
Here, Max, do something with it.
Yeah, I mean, well, as they just said, they discovered who the characters would be and what the story was ultimately going to be through the act of discovery of going there and shooting. And I think they approached the edit. Mirra is great at knowing, okay, we need to let the footage tell us what the heart of the story is and where the story needs to go. And that, of course, I'm sure in turn informed what she then filmed when she went back in subsequent trips. Absolutely, we really started editing in earnest after the 2015 trip, which is where the bulk of the footage is from. But it was a similar act of process of discovery during that process.
Yeah.
And Mirra,
I
go
will
ahead.
just say that once we had shot in Zambia, when we were in Kenya and Namibia, I was very specifically going after the Community Conservancy story, because then I knew we had discovered that in the process, not only of working on the film, but just being in those places. And so that was, I was hardwired to find those stories, because both Kenya and Namibia have a much longer tradition of community conservancies. So we could see where this might lead. And in Zambia, what you see is that it's nascent. You know, it's more of an uphill climb for them, but they're working toward it.
How many hours of footage?
Boy, you know, I would have been able to answer that question, but then they went back a couple more times. So, hundreds. I mean,
Hundreds of hours
sure.
to make a little bit of over an hour. So going through the footage is critical, knowing the footage, logging the footage. People don't understand. They think, oh, you go and you come back and you have a film. It's an incredible process. Mirra, are you looking at all the footage? I assume you're looking at all the footage. Are you writing some kind of overall treatment to guide Max, but also to guide your own thinking about what might start? Of course, if you're anything like me, it's terrible first treatment, and the second one, and the third one, and the fifth one, and finally it starts to come together. What's your process?
Well, in this case, and it was really the first time I had done this, I shot the film. So and we were in the field in places often with no electricity, certainly no internet, and even just making sure, that we, we had what we needed day to day was something I was very, very focused on. But because I had to both shoot it and watch it while I was there, it was informing every day's choices as I was working. And
excuse me, you worked 10 hours and then watched the footage that you just shot?
not all the way, no. But as I was shooting and after I would come back, I would go to particular scenes to make sure that certain things were there. And then once we got back, I had transcripts made. We did our own note-taking and logging, but I'm also a former film editor, so it was very hands-on. I mean, for the most part, Max and I looked at everything together, and then there were periods of time when he worked completely on his own, and periods of time when we regrouped and worked very much together. We have known each other and worked together long enough now so that we can pass the material back and forth. And to answer your question, the treatment aspect of it for me came mostly when I was trying to find money for the film. When I had to write about it for other people to understand, what we were trying to do.
And Richard, are you there with Mirra at every shot, or are you in the office going, oh God, Joe's not available tomorrow. We had him all scheduled, and who's gonna, Mary, is she gonna fit in? I mean, because no matter how long you're there, it's never enough time.
I think Joe and Mary quit before we began, so there was no office, and yes, we were pretty much together for every shot. I mean, we were both in Africa every time.
Richard was there at all times and did the additional camera, so we were a pretty lean team while we were working.
Wildlife photography is quite an art. I assume you didn't shoot all of that.
Well, except for the poaching, the killing of the animals and the arrests and so on. Much of the wildlife footage is mine. I didn't shoot the Sunni story, that heartbreaking baby elephant. That happened before we got there, and I didn't shoot some of the orphan babies, some of the. I would say 85% of the wildlife footage is mine.
And you're kidding. That's remarkable. That's really remarkable. Wildlife photographers go out for months at a time waiting for the shot. So
I think that's right, about 80 or 80.
Sure, yeah.
I asked my editor.
A little bit of archival. Obviously, like you said, the more low-res shots that you see that are footage of poachers, that they did not shoot. But yeah, no, the wildlife footage is Mirra and Richard for sure.
And who do you think is the audience? Do you think about that before you go, as you start? Do you have an outlet already for it? I mean, if you're doing this for children, it's a different kind of film than you're doing it for adults. If you're doing it for college or environmental organizations, it's a different kind of film.
My hope is that this is a film for anyone who cares about the environment. I mean, at least during the time that we've been making this film, there's more attention, certainly to climate change, but I think also to issues of habitat loss and loss of species, the whole chain of life. People are more concerned about it, as they should be. I think films like this, I think most films now have a sort of self-selecting group of people who will automatically find them. What I'm hoping is that there's some crossover here. Documentary audiences, adventure or nature, exploratory, exploration kinds of stories. But mostly, I assume it will be those people who care about environmental issues. And, we barely finished the film in time to get it here, so we haven't really started.
This is the world premiere?
Yes, this is the premiere. Thank you all for being here. You lucky few.
Our time is already up. Gone. I didn't even see the 5-minute or the 2-minute. You can't just hold it up and turn it down. That's not fair. Okay, one question.
Well, it's just an appreciation, not a question. I thought Kingsley is a wonderful character.
Kingsley.
The character
Stephanie's
of
talking about
is
Kingsley.
wonderful. I really enjoyed his story, and to me, he held the entire film together.
Thank you.
You know, and the personal stories that he tells made me understand so much more than the typical PBS documentary about the Tusk billion-dollar trade around the world, you know. And, I mean, there's been a lot in the news lately about the raping of elephant tusks and selling them. And why did you include, I have a question, why did you include the tusk burning and the tusk grinding in China? Why did you include that?
You know, there are many implements of change that are being tried, and that one is not one that everybody believes in, but one way that some governments chose to show that these things have no value was to destroy them and take them off the market. Not everyone agrees with that. Honestly, it was not a talk thing, it was something people could see. And as a unified gesture around the world, people choosing to do this together, it was that kind of event. The various countries chose to make an event of destroying ivory so that people would understand these things belong on the animals and not on the shelf in your house. You have to try everything. You know, China now has a very good campaign, an anti-poaching campaign that's being carried out by celebrities there. So you have to keep finding new ways to educate people away from seeing these things as worth destroying an animal for.
Richard, one quick thing before Jackie literally brings me the hook.
One of the things that I think Mirra discovered, well, to do a film about Africa and wildlife and the environment, to find misery and pain is easy. To find answers or a piece of the answer was really, I think, an extraordinary effort and extraordinary piece of creative filmmaking that I really think Mirra did that with this film.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for coming.